What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to an all-new episode of TAETRO Talks, brought to you by 343 Labs. We have a really great show for you today. I think you're going to be able to take a lot of value from our guest. We're going to learn a lot about music business, publishing, some of the stuff that seems super mysterious but is super important if you really want to make a career out of making music and being a musician. Of course, today's stream is brought to you by 343 Labs. Like I said at the top, 343 Labs is an electronic music school online in New York and soon to be in Berlin. Of course, we're in this time of pandemic and quarantine, so all of our courses are currently available online. So it doesn't matter where in the world you are, you can learn with some of the best teachers. We have Ableton Live certified trainers, Beatport charting producers. Like, all of our instructors have years of experience in the music industry, and you can take a lot from them. Courses for intermediate, advanced, beginners, Ableton, Logic, synthesis. You ask for it, we got it. If it has to do with electronic music and music production, you can take a course on it at 343 Labs and learn with some really amazing teachers. 343labs.com, link is in the description if it catches your ear during this time of intro. But I think it's about time to get ready to talk to our guest today, who, like I said, is going to bring a lot of value. Today we have Ming, who is a Grammy nominated DJ, producer, has done music for TV, commercials, shows. You've been making music for probably longer than I've been alive. Got your start in the 90s. And you've just been around the block. So, like, you've had your own label. You're an artist. You're a composer. Welcome to the show. What did the evolution look like for you in making it your career, making it your full-time living, starting as an artist and then gradually evolving through the industry?
Sure. For me, I got into production in college, electronic music production in college, and at the same time that the internet was just starting to become a thing. And so I was teaching myself to become a producer and also teaching myself how to code. And what I did when I graduated was I parlayed the ability to do internet work to bring me back to New York City. I went to school in Miami. And start building my studio and start learning how to produce. And during that process, I got a great internet job, which paid me good money. And I met somebody who was Fred Sargolini, who's the FS in Ming and FS. And he was already a music producer working for a hip hop production company. And we played in a rock band together. And then while we were in that band, we started a pop band. It was more sort of like an early Sugar Ray before Sugar Ray existed. It was sort of this like electronic meets like poppy vocals. Fred sang and I was, scratch and played guitar and he played bass. And it was sort of this early electronic pop thing. And while we were in that, we started making sort of experimental hip hop stuff. And that music ended up getting signed, I think first to Brooklyn Music Limited and then to Ubiquity. It was more sort of Dusted Breaks and like the original, like before the Chemical Brothers, there was the Dust Brothers and they made this kind of, or Cold Cut. We were making that type of music. And over a 4-year or so period of time of shopping around different singles and things like that, we netted a deal with Ohm Records in San Francisco. And at the time, turntablism and sort of like experimental music was starting to become at its prime. And we were part of this Deep Concentration series where there was a bunch of experimental hip hop stuff with great guys like Apollo and Vin Rock and Jay Boogie, the Scratch Perverts, the Scratch Pickles. And we were part of that sort of seminal breakbeat scratch scene in the late 90s. So I kept my job during that whole thing. And we started, I think we put out our first record in 97 or 98.
Was that important to you, keeping the job like as a layer of security?
Well, I think that there's this concept that like the music business is going to provide, and the music business does not provide. The music business actually does not want you to succeed. It's sort of like this: you're swimming against the tide of a million people vying for any sort of space and air that they can get. And the only way that you're able to get a grasp and start to move forward in the music business is by providing something that does not exist. And then people will start to take note and allow you to become shoulder to shoulder with them or start working within the same parameters. So for us, there was this experimental hip hop, scratch, turntablist thing happening. Some of those guys were more focused on the turntable aspect, but we were more focused on the studio aspect. So we sort of had this leg up on the production side. And we found a way onto, into that realm by being good producers, right? We could scratch and do all that stuff, but not at the level these other guys could. But we found ourselves on a tour for Deep Concentration that was a 30-city tour. And this was 1999. And keeping the job was important because I funded our band basically. So I was able to have my partner just work on music full time while I did marketing and music and everything else. But I kept my job. So I would literally go to work in the morning, work till 5 or 6 o'clock, come home, rest a little bit, do music from 8 till 11 o'clock at night, and then go out. And I would go out every single night of the week to meet people. That back then, this was like a crazy networking time in the city. And I did that for about 4 years until the bubble burst in 2000. The internet bubble burst, and I was let go from the job that I was at, but I had a really good severance. But the funny thing about that was we had a tour planned for September, so that happened in June, and I basically had the summer off to really get myself in gear ready for this tour.
So was it like a forcing mechanism, essentially?
It wasn't a forcing mechanism, but for the age that I was making very good money, enough money to be able to pay for our rent, help us with equipment, do do the things that you needed to do as a professional. I had a professional income. And that allowed me to buy, gear. We ran a record label. We did all kinds of things that you can't do if you don't have money. The music business requires money. That sort of thing that like you have no money and someone's going to discover you is one in a bazillion. Having a good music career is 1 in a million. So if you want to make it hard,
don't
be as poor as
you
can.
Yeah,
if you're poor, that's what it is, right? If you don't have money and that's your only thing is music, that's fine. But my situation was, I had skills. I was I was good technically in the internet business. I could earn a good living, and that provided us the opportunities to take tours that we wouldn't have been able to afford while living in Manhattan, because Manhattan is very expensive,
of course.
right? So you can't just like peace out for a month and not worry about making any money.
Right.
So the first tour that we did, and we had done a bunch of different shows with Ohm Records at different parties they had in San Francisco, was the Deep Concentration tour. And we were the only group because they were thinking of signing us that did all 30 dates or however many dates that we had. And so different guys came on and off the tour. Z-Trip was on the tour for a little while. J Boogie, I think this Grouch Perverts, Apollo and Vin Rock. It was just sort of like this great scratch tour. And that was sort of like the moment. And we were getting paid $250 a date.
Okay.
So between two people living in Manhattan, that is not enough.
How are you paying the rent on that?
No, you're not.
Yeah.
But because I had been working my job, we sort of had like a buffer. And when so we had a safety net, and we had sort of a plan of learning, getting enough room. The best analogy is if you're going to open a business, the reason why you take a business loan is to get enough money to start the business, but also have a buffer to get things off and running. That's what business loans are for. And the music business works the same way. You either take a loan from a major label or a bank to pay for the buffer to get things moving. It's just not as cut and dry or as practiced as like going to a bank and getting a loan to start a store or a restaurant or something like that. And so that after those 30 dates, and I had been used to a paycheck every 2 weeks, a good paycheck.
Right.
So I had during the tour, I had to transition from the mindset of, not really worrying about money at all to being very focused on the accounting and how are we going to make money on the road and what can we do to make more money and how can we squeeze,
So you were always business oriented. You were always like, how is this? Like, okay, have my job. That's our safety net. Job is gone. Now it's like, this is my business. This is my job now. It was a full.
Well, yes, because also my partner, don't forget, he had been doing music full time before I met him. Yeah. So when I took him from that production company and he and I formed a corporation together and started our label, it was Manhattan Studios was the name of the label. I was pulling him from his music life already. And so he was able to maintain and still just do music for a living. That's what he had been doing before. I was not a full-time music producer. Mm-hmm. So when we got our deal and then went on the road, went on the road first before we got our deal. But once I realized what a shift that was for me, lifestyle-wise, I didn't I didn't want to go back to working, but I had a skill that could always make me money. Like I would build websites. So if we ever got in trouble, I would go out to my contacts and see who needed a website, and I would build, a website, and that would take care of things for a while. But I generally tried to just focus on making money from music after that point. And
Well,
it's just a different way of thinking. You have to really compartmentalize how you're going to make money.
yeah, and it seems like the having a partner actually worked really well. I think a lot of people go at this alone. So it's interesting to hear you had a very clear situation where it was you and your partner and you guys were in it together, and that actually probably afforded you a lot of opportunity with one person bringing in a solid paycheck and keeping things steady for a while, the other person 100% doing the music side of things. Like if you had to do that all just by yourself, it probably would have been so much more difficult.
It would have taken forever. And in all honesty, I didn't have all the skills that Fred had. I didn't know
Mm,
how to mix an album. I didn't know how to mix records. I was learning how to produce. I was getting my ideas out there. I had played in bands all of my, teenage years. I was a guitar player. I've been in a lot of music situations, been in the studio, work, like all that stuff, but I never started and finished a record on my own and mixed it before meeting him. It was not something. So I knew what I was when I was paying for our ability, like our rent, I was also paying for school. I knew what I was doing. I was saying, like, here's a guy. I'm going to suck all the information I can possibly get out of this guy to learn how to be a professional music producer. He's already doing it. So
yep.
I could either, and back then there weren't music schools like this. There was, you could go to certain types of schools, but they weren't like, there was no electronic music program. You know what I mean? There was no,
Yeah.
how do you be like a producer like this guy? So I never looked at it as like it's just about me funding this project. It was more about this is how I'm going to get my education.
It's a paid
And I'm
learning
lucky enough,
experience.
yeah, and I'm
Tuition.
lucky enough to like have been able to go to school and get a good education and be able to then get a great job that afforded me the ability to then sort of get into another thing that I wanted to get into.
Right.
And that's how I learned how the touring business works. So that was my first music business revenue stream, even though we had signed records, and I can talk about, what that entails and how you can get advances and all that kind of stuff. But that was, how we saw how touring would go forward. We would put out a record, we would tour for as many dates as we could with as much money we could get from each date. And I don't know if people really understand that when you're on the road, it sounds glamorous, but every second you're on the road costs you money. It's like you're in a hotel every night. So, when you're in a hotel, if you're not maximizing like you could be on a trip, but if you're not maximizing your
Yeah.
stay, you're just burning money,
Right.
right? So you have to make decisions. What kind of hotels do I want to stay in? What kind of plane flights do I want to take? How far do I want to travel in a day? How many people can I tour with? Who can I bring with us? Do we need a tour manager? Because tour managers deal with the logistics of touring. They deal with, all the problems that you have. They deal with the promoters. They do all that. And I was that guy. So
Right.
in order for us to afford all of that, it was like I'm the tour manager. I booked all the flights. I did all that in the beginning of our career. So I learned all of these little slices of business by having to do them because we couldn't afford someone else to do them for us until we could.
Amazing.
You know.
Yeah. And it seems you're probably stronger for it too, because learning all these different aspects. Now, when it's time to go hire a tour manager, you know exactly the kind of person you need. You know what it takes.
Yeah, you're
Or you,
basically replacing your part of yourself.
yep.
You don't want to be managing the tour manager in the sense of like you're not doing your job right. You want to be able to take a young person who's interested in being with your band, is not going to get paid a lot of money, but is going to enjoy being on the road with you because you're going to be in very close quarters. They make their per diem, they make their money off the shows, and how can you make that person make more money? So we would start to use our tour manager as our merch person. So they
Right.
would do all the logistics and all that, but they would also manage our merchandise, which merch is another way of making money on the road. Um, yeah, and so that we would have, and the interesting story about how we got our tour manager was that he started our fan club. He was in Missouri, a guy that we played for in Missouri in Lawrence, Kansas. Lawrence, Kansas. Um, this kid was a friend of one of the promoters. He was interested in what we were doing. We I think we had done a gig for Microsoft where they had given us a computer and we were Mac guys. And this kid was like he was a, a PC dude, and he wanted to do this fan club for us, but he didn't have a computer. We said, hey, you could run our fan club and we'll give you a computer. So we sent the kid a computer, and, because we didn't need it.
Yeah.
And he needed it. And he was super psyched about it. He started this fan club for us. He would send stickers to fans all over the place and send our mixtapes out and all that kind of stuff. And then after we built this relationship with him, and then one day we realized it was time for it to have a road manager. We were like, hey, dude, you want to move to New York and, be our road manager? And he was like, I'm there.
Nice.
And boom, we had this kid that we had a great relationship with, who was super enthusiastic, who ended up being a great tour manager for us for years.
It's community and team building. Like, it seems like that you're very focused on that, and like being very pragmatic about how you choose who's on the team, what they're doing, what can you do to supplement, to cut some costs. And it's interesting, like a couple of things you have mentioned so far, even though we're talking like historically about things that happened a while ago when the landscape of the industry was very different in a couple ways, and in the things that you said, they're very similar still. It just looks a little bit different. Like you talked about, oh, we were Mac guys and Microsoft sent us a computer. Like that's modern day, that's brand deals now. That's
Right.
everything. And then you talked about the music industry being like, I think people glorify the old days of the music industry. Like, oh, it was so much easier to be an artist back then, so much easier to get discovered, whatever. But the way you described it is exactly how people describe it now, where everybody is trying to suck up the oxygen in the room that is the music industry, and there's only so much oxygen to go around. And that's everybody's critique of social media. But that's not new. That's the music industry.
I mean, I think that's industry. That's the confusing thing about music and music business, is that there are the old adage that like there's brilliant musicians that like I knew this guy who was a brilliant singer or a brilliant pianist, or whatever, but they went nowhere, right? It's because that's not necessarily what the music business is about. It's a different sort of carnival. It's a different animal. You know what I mean? Just because you may be, maybe great at something, someone else might be slightly better than you at that, and may be better looking, may have more connections, may have money. And therefore, you just don't ever get a shot to do it because you're sort of the Scottie Pippen to the Michael Jordan. Even though, you know what I mean? Like, there's only so many guys who can play on the basketball team, right?
Yep.
That was a bad analogy, but you know what I'm saying? Maybe he would have been the greatest player of all time at that time if Michael Jordan hadn't, been around. I don't know. That's what it's like.
Right.
So, and the other thing is, sometimes people need to hear.
I was going to say, like, it seems like people could have the exact same skill. Like you could have had two Michael Jordans, right? But if we're back in the music industry, right? If one Michael Jordan is really good at the business side of things and the other Michael Jordan is only good at basketball, the one that's good at basketball and is willing to do all this business stuff and has a keen ear for all this business stuff is going to succeed, even though they have the same exact skill set.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you have the same exact skill set to some degree, but then it's how far are you willing to go. I gave some advice to an artist I'm working with, doing some co-writing with. She's amazing, and she's making her way through the music business. And my advice was, carry the rock. Don't wait for somebody else to pick up the rock or the stone and carry it for you. Put the stone on your shoulder, get going, and start running. If you run with a rock on your shoulder, you'll build up the stamina to be able to do that so that you don't notice the rock is on your shoulder anymore. And then that's when management, that's when a booking agent, that's when other people who can help you will notice, wow, this person's running and carrying all this weight themselves. Maybe I could be part of that machine. Big mistake that musicians make is thinking, when do I get a manager? When do I get a booking agent? When is it going to come to me? And it comes to you when you are moving the mountain yourself, when there's interest happening that's above and beyond what you can handle anymore. And don't forget, these people have to make money too.
Yeah.
So if you're making no money as a musician, the only way that you get a manager without making any money is to have somebody who believes in the future vision. So that means that they're either not ahead of you, or they are and they can help you up. They're behind you, they can push you forward, or they can run with you. Now, personally, for me, I've always worked with managers who run side by side with me because I have a lot of my own business ideas and all that, and I want to be able to have a conversation with you and agree to disagree upon things, but not get into pissing matches over ideas that may, it'd be different if if I had a manager that could make deals happen way ahead of me. I've had a manager like that for a little bit, but then you end up waiting for them to do things for you.
Right.
Or why hasn't this happened? Why didn't you open this door? I know you can open this door. And then this sort of becomes a sort of self-fulfilling prophecy of just you stop opening the doors yourself.
Yeah. So
if you can run your own team, then you're a better position because then everyone can be not equal, but they can be parallel to you. They can
for sure. And one thing I'm thinking about is we led this conversation talking about touring and merch sales and live shows and stuff. And have you I know we're skipping over a large part of the timeline probably, but compare that to now. What is the relationship with music in the music industry now? Because it seems like you're doing a ton of like production and remixing and things like that. So have things shifted away from live and more towards studio oriented?
Unfortunately for me, I would like to be, it's funny, the pandemic happened and then a personal desire no longer, it's sort of like doesn't matter anymore because, so for me, I did 10 years with Ming and FS. We toured over a 10-year period. We would do 50 to 100 dates a year. We made a lot of money from being on the road. We made good money from selling merchandise. Brands would license our music, so we would make money from licensing music, and that's where I learned how to do licensing. Great. Then during like the sunset part of our career together, this is towards 2004 to 2006, I had started doing some work for a commercial music agency called Crushing Music. And they were a commercial music agency that strictly made music for commercials. And I was scratching on I think it was a Britney Spears Pepsi commercial. And they saw me as sort of like that hip hop turntablist guy they would call whenever they needed that urban dude, right? And so I would come in and do my thing and I'd get paid to do that. And I didn't, they would pay me for it, but I didn't realize that there was also union dues that you would get paid, and you get talent partner checks for the actual performance on television and all that. And one day I got a call from a musicians union, the local AFM in New York, and they were like, "You have some money here that you need to come pick up." And I'm like, "Who are you?" And they were like, "You have 70 checks that are sitting here."
Whoa.
I'm like, "What?"
So you had no idea. But it's still getting issued. You didn't even know you were getting it.
Because there's a system in place for music that's being used on television, but I didn't know this. I just thought I was getting paid for my sessions. Yep. And to, my partner Fred used to make fun of me because he was a much better DJ scratch DJ than I was. I mean, like with not even night and day. I'm just like a regular DJ. He was a scratch DJ, but I could, I just learned some shit that whatever. And he would laugh at me for scratching on these commercials, being like, "You're wasting your time. Why are you doing these things or whatever?" And then so I go, they pay me $500 here or $1,000 here, which is still good money. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
Don't forget. Still, I go to the office and there's 70 checks for like $250, $500 for $60, and I'm like, I add the whole thing up. It ends up being like $8-9 grand in residual. And from that moment forward, I went back and I said, "This is you're making fun of me, scratching on these right?" But that's when I realized that commercial music industry was massive, and that even though we made real, quote in quotes, real music, that never had an idea of like trying to make commercial music, I realized that because we were seen as cool in the industry, I could probably start my own commercial music business, and if I even had 2 or 3 things go, I would be making $30,000 to $50,000 per commercial spot on those things alone. And how I learned that was, I forget what tour it was, but Nissan was doing an ad campaign called Switch. They had just started that ad campaign. And this guy, Michael Frick from Mophonics, reached out to us about making music from car sounds. And he said, "Could you make music from car sounds?" And I was like, "Yeah, no problem. We could do that. No problem." So we made a bunch of tracks from these car sounds, door slamming, the seatbelt sound,
totally.
Beat stuff, whatever. And then we got a call back. I sent in like 4 or 5 different versions. It was, a 30-second bit. So for me, it was like, about bing, dang, dang, we did a bunch of things. He did some, I did some. We sent them in. Didn't think much of it, thinking, oh, well, whatever. I get a call back a week later, and they're like, and DJ Shadow was pitching for it, and a bunch of like, other big names. Spooky might have been pitching for it at the time. We get a call back, and they were like, would you guys want to be in the commercial?
Whoa.
And we were like, and we were going to be on tour. Like we had a tour coming up, and we were both like, yeah, I mean, does it pay? Like we have a tour. Like we're doing the finances for the tour. We're figuring out how are we going to afford to do all these things. And all of a sudden they're like, yeah. So we end up doing the deal. They pick our music. We become these guys. They fly us down to Hilton Head, not Hilton Head, somewhere I think North Carolina. There's a TV, whatever, a film TV
like
place. Studio, right? But they end up getting a house, and they put a fake studio together for us, and we do what we would do, sort of do this commercial. And it's still out there. If you Google Nissan Sounds Ming and FS, it's still out there. It's sort of
chat,
like
do it, chat.
You'll see it. You'll see me. Go do that right now. So we made this music out of car sound, but it ended up being very lucrative for us in the sense of it ran during the Super Bowl.
Oh wow.
So because we were on camera and we talked and we did all this music, I became SAG. So I was in the Screen Actors Guild because it's hard to do that. You have to have a certain amount of on-screen performances, and I'm still SAG from that. But we made such a good amount of money, but the agencies, I could see how much money they were making.
Yeah.
Oh, no, I mean, like, we made good money, don't get me wrong, and it helped us with our tour. We went and, like, it was the whole experience was great. It helped pay for an RV. We did that tour in an RV instead of doing it flying because we were just tired of flying all the time. And it was a long tour, and we had our tour manager, and we were bringing merchandise and all that. But that's where I learned the value of commercial music, and that those were the golden years of it. So like straight before like 1990, maybe 2000 to 2008 were really the golden years of sort of, for me, knowing how to like navigate that commercial music world. And I started a company called Habitat Music, which is music for film and television, with a couple other guys. After Ming and FS disbanded for about 2 years, after 2006 to 2008 or 9, I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do, and I was doing commercial music. And, we did a whole bunch of big campaigns. I did a DreamWorks Puss in Boots campaign. Nice. We did Propel Water. I mean, like tons and tons and tons of commercial stuff. But what I did notice, so again, most of my income prior to that was touring and merchandise. Now I went from being in this group to no longer being in this group anymore. And I'm like, wow, what am I going to do? I'll focus on the commercial music. And the other thing, I know I'm a little New York crazy, talk. But we also had about a catalog of about 1,000 instrumental beats, old hip hop stuff that Fred had worked on from his old company, stuff that we had from different bands that we had put together. And we were the first Americans signing to Cobalt Music Publishing. Cobalt started in the UK. We were the first guys to get signed in America. And we had this large catalog of beats and music and songs and things that we had to license. And so they were really prolific in licensing our music to film and television in the beginning of our deal. So we were also making money from publishing. So that became a whole other thing. So that was at the same time. Yeah, so we can talk about that. But that's at the same time I learned commercial music and how that works. And then the bubble on that kind of died out a little bit once you could start licensing music for almost nothing. Like when the Pump Audios and all these other places came around, you could, for $150, you can license this,
For sure. So I want to get into the nitty gritty of that, but I also want to ask like an artist level question, because what I was already thinking is like you talked about that backlog of beats and instrumentals, and just like hand that over, and it gets licensed out. How much were you separating, or maybe there was a transition period where you started separating you and your work as like the artist known as Ming or like your duo, versus creating work specifically, maybe not specifically for a campaign, but knowing like, oh, this music I'm making right now, I'm just going to put it in the box to go to licensing and to go to publishing. Like, is there a distinction between the two, or are they the same?
We had an interesting, yes, there is. But the answer to that is yes and no. We had a slightly different foray into that because we started at a time when you would make an album. It wasn't a singles driven market at the time.
Right.
So if you were to do, let's say we produced a hip hop album for somebody, there would be 11 to 15 cuts on that album. But to get to those cuts, you would do 25 to 30 to 40 beats for the MCs to find the right cuts. And even if you did recorded vocals on, let's say, 25 cuts, they wouldn't all make the light of day.
Right.
And so they would when you make an album for somebody else, or you make music for a project that doesn't get purchased or gets purchased, they purchase the masters. And that's the value of the music. So if you say you do an album, I'm producing you, we record 25 cuts together, but only 12 of them go live. Well, what are we doing with the rest of the music? Either it all becomes B-sides or stuff for your next album, or you and I, you're like, yo, whatever, I'm going to take these beats back and I'm going to they're going to my catalog. So if you talk about 10 years of producing, and don't forget, Fred had been producing before me. He had tons of material that wasn't being exploited, but he didn't really know how to exploit it. So part of our partnership was me being like, look, let's take all these old masters, let's remaster them, let's take them off the old drives that you have, let's make them commercially viable, and then I will go out and find ways to monetize them. So we had our own music, because we were in a bunch of bands together. We were in a rock band. We were in Beat Tree, which was that pop electronic group. We were in a band called Freddie Churchill, which was like an angsty System of a Down type band. I mean, we were just prolific, like music.
You were set up for this. Because you had all the genres. You could have started your own. You started your own house, like a publishing house, right there. You had you had it all.
We have all of it. I still have all of it. And like, I'm a guitar player, bass player. He was a keyboard player, drummer. Like, we just were a factory, the two of us. Our personalities over time became oil and water, and that's water under the bridge. But as a music duo, we both really complemented each other's talents. I was good with business. He was good with mixing. I played guitar and bass. He played bass and piano. And, like, all these things worked together. There was a reason for us to be together until there wasn't. But, I learned so many things along the way to how to make money from doing the thing that I loved. Right. The important thing that I think I want to pause right now is that if it all sounds like Ming is the business dude, blah, 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 business, 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 you have no idea how much free I do. I do an unbelievable amount of free. An unbelievable.
Tell me more about that. What is something?
Because everything that you do in the music business is free. It's all free until you can bring a value.
Somebody pays for it. Yeah.
So, like, there's guys, and this isn't to discount. I saw a post the other day that someone be like, just because I kept my day job all these years doesn't make me a real musician. No, it does not make you not a real musician. You're a real musician, but if you never make money from your music, you're still just practicing.
Right. It's
a hobby. It's a hobby. You're an amateur, and not in a negative way, like you're an amateur, you're not good. It's just that there's a part that you're not connecting to the music. Once you connect music and commerce, you have to understand that it changes the music. That over time, you will understand how to make the music more valuable based on where your income streams can come from. And it sounds a little businessy to say that, but it's sort of like the best way to describe this is when you make your first album and you've never been on the road and you've never done live shows with this music yet. You make this music in a bubble. You get a deal. You hope it does well. It does. People receive it well, and then you're on tour. While you're on tour, you realize what works about that music live and what doesn't work about that music live. And so that's where the first change happens. I love the album that I made, but man, is it hard to perform this live. These songs don't translate well live. Let's replace them with these other songs that based on this other music. You know what I mean? And you realize, live is where we're making most of our money. So maybe we should, if we want to make albums in a bubble, then we're going to have to make versions for playing live that are different than what's on the album so that they perform better. That's what we did in Ming and FS. We didn't change what we would have made on an album for live per se, but we then knew we had to make another album from that music to play it live because it
For
wasn't
live.
translated
Yeah.
well. But a lot of musicians, like Coldplay is a great example. If you listen to Coldplay's first album, everyone wants to hate on Coldplay. But it was made sort of in a bubble, that sense of like beautiful, delicate rock music that was like, sort of like very ethereal. But when you put yourself on stage every night and you have to perform those very vulnerable songs, and the stage keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger,
It becomes a stadium.
you
Yeah, and
realize
suddenly
that
you're
you need to
singing
have
these
songs
lullabies to a
that move the
stadium.
air in a
Yeah.
stadium, right? You need
Yeah.
stadium rock songs. So you
Yeah.
evolve into that musician. You don't stay usually this small. It becomes a
Right. And I
bigger
think
extravaganza, and like things, the commerce has its way of creeping into, you know.
for sure. Because you don't know the possibilities until you see the reality of the possibilities, right? If you've always been in your home studio, if you've never gone outside of that, you don't know the possibilities of a full studio. If you've only performed for a small club venue, you don't know the possibilities performing for a large stadium. And as those possibilities grow, like your art adapts to that reality and those possibilities because it's now it's the door has been opened for you. And I guess it seems like for you, it's like a constant chain of this door opened. Okay, live here for a bit. Next door opens, and one thing leads to another, basically.
I mean, yeah, I've been lucky enough to be able to see the trends and the patterns happening before they happen. From, like I could see with Ming and FS, I knew that was sort of winding down. He didn't want to be on the road anymore, and we had done 4 albums, 3 with Ohm, 1 with a label called Spun, and I kind of knew that was going to end up. We were producing other artists at the time. We were ready to start producing other acts and stop focusing on ourselves so much. And I wanted to change the type of music I was doing. I was doing hip hop and drum and bass, and I had kind of gotten a little bit tired of that scene. And I was really looking to get into doing house music. I fell in love with house music when I first started in electronic music. And the most logical step for me would have been to do dubstep next, because that was becoming the next big thing. And I had done a couple of
Right.
dubstep tracks, but I didn't have that. I couldn't see myself doing that for another 10 years. It wasn't like in my heart to become, go from this aggravated drum and bass hip hop thing, this angsty music, to another angsty music for 10 years. It just wasn't there anymore. I wanted to be able to
For
do,
sure.
like, go and do music that I felt like I could do for the next 20 years, 30 years. House music gave me that freedom. The same freedom I
Right.
found in hip hop and drum and bass 10 years prior. So then I had to like relearn how to be a good house music producer. And electro house was going on during that time. And Fred had gone on to do a bunch of dubstep stuff, which was a much more logical progression, but my heart just wasn't there. So
And was that a humbling like experience? Did you feel like, because it seems like you were very open to not putting yourself in a box and being like, no, this doesn't feel good. My next step is this, so I'm gonna have to learn a lot. I feel like a lot of people more so put themselves into boxes and say, nope, this is what I do. I'm sticking to it. I don't need to go learn a bunch more things. I spent all these years learning this thing.
I mean, if you do that, your career has a finite length to it, unless you get lucky, and that thing that you choose um, can span your whole career. Even Radiohead, look at Tom York. He didn't want to do, and the guys, if you go back to the interviews, they didn't rock music and that rock and roll, that sound that they started with. By the time that Creep and all that had sort of like blown them out of the water and done all that stuff, they were
They
kind of
hated the
bored of
bends.
they were
Yeah,
bored of doing that music, and they really wanted to find something new. And you know the world louds them about taking this big chance because they were so huge, but they were just sane musicians trying to do something to make themselves happy. And I think that luckily, even though they alienated a huge part of their audience, they found a new audience in electronic music. Electronic music people
right.
were ready for Radiohead to embrace what they had already loved, right? So it was the perfect timing for them. But for me, what happened, which was a little bit shocking, and it took me years not to get over, but to be able to figure out how to um, navigate it, was that in the very small period from Ming and FS to when I was ready to start doing like 2008, 2009, come back out as a DJ and tour, the industry changed so drastically that people didn't know who I was anymore. I mean, I'm someone who
Was that liberating or
it
scary?
was no, it wasn't scary. It was just frustrating. It was like, holy cow, people loud me as doing like, Bass Nectar would be like, oh, I do my music because of Ming and FS, and Pretty Lights, was and I could name the Glitch Mob. All those guys got their ideas from what we were doing live, and to not be able to just get back in the game was extremely frustrating. To be like, wait, I just did 10 years on the road. How am I not able to get booked and go out and do X, Y, and Z? So in that happening, I did go out and play dates. It just wasn't happening the way that I wanted it to happen. So I started to focus on where I could, make money. The commercial music industry was dipping. It was going down, so there wasn't a lot of money there. I couldn't get out back on the road the way that I wanted to get back out on the road, and I had spent a good amount of time, doing writing sessions and songwriting with people in LA and New York, and I was a songwriter, so I was like, you know what? Maybe it's time for me to go do a publishing deal, a co-pub deal, where I get an advance from a publisher so that I can live off of that while I'm writing songs and stuff for people. And, with my history and everything else that I'd done, I found the right situation and I went out and got an advance, and that was my income for a while. And now at this point, I'm a full-time record producer. My house music stuff is doing really well. And, if I would be worried about going out on the road, but now I don't have to worry about it. So all these guys who are on the road, who are now like, what am I going to do for income? I'm sort of in a sweet place because I already have all of my production income coming in. I have projects,
Totally.
and I'm still doing commercial music. I'm producing records and I'm doing my own records. So it's kind of worked out nicely for me. And when we get out of this,
So
I'll, probably get back on the road. If
yeah,
we do,
and
right?
people will be dying for it. Yeah. Um, I guess there's so many directions this conversation can go in chat. I think is just like listening intently because there aren't that many questions. I think people are just soaking it up, which is
You're like,
cool.
that dude is bald and crazy as a mother.
No, they would be saying that in the chat if they had that to say.
So
They
let me just
say
let's
the
put it
rude
out there
stuff.
real quick. So we can talk about tons of things. Do people want to hear specifically what is a master recording? What is publishing? What is your
I think
writers?
it's yeah.
How do you
I,
navigate that world? What does a record contract look like? When do you get a record contract? If that's interesting for people, we should definitely dive into it because I have an interesting story for that as well, which is my first record deal with Ohm Records is actually a terrible record deal for me. I don't own
okay.
the masters. We don't own the publishing. They own the record for they own the 3 albums for life. It's a in perpetuity, which means like it's basically a terrible record deal. But
Right. So what did you got paid once for it
we got
or
paid, yeah, we got an advance. We got an advance each record, and then we had a touring career. But what I always tell people is that you can't negotiate yourself out of a career. So
right?
if the deal there wasn't really much options to negotiate that deal. They weren't offering us a different deal. That was the deal.
That's what it was. Take it or leave it.
It kind of, right? And like maybe our attorney could have done a better job negotiating it. We were really focused on Beat Tree at the time. We thought our band Beat Tree, the pop electronic group, was going to take off, but our experimental hip hop stuff ended up being the thing that got the bigger deal, right?
Yeah.
And maybe our attorney was more focused on this other project, but it gave me a career. That's what it came down
Despite
to.
the bad deal.
Yeah, it was a bad
It
deal,
built
but it
something
put me
much
on the
longer.
road, and the label worked their butts off for us, and we built a lot of relationships, and that's what gave me the ability to get on the road. So sometimes I get scared for people, or I feel bad for this message of like, you got to own all your masters, you got to own this, and you can put out your own records, and you can do all these things. If you're not like me, if you're listening and watching this thing, and you are not left brain, right brain like I am, you're not going to do well in this business. You need partners that can help you do the things that you don't do well. And
Yeah.
so sometimes a bad record deal is just a step forward. You just go work past the deal.
It's a step towards a good record deal.
Yeah, I mean, like, take yourself out of the music business. No one builds the best whatever it is the first time they do it, you know?
Yeah.
You write your first piece of software, it's got tons of bugs in it, it takes you forever, it does nothing. The next thing you write, it's a lot easier for you to write, there's less bugs, it does a little bit more, right? And to a point where eventually you work on a team and you make something that's really amazing, and you were the architect, you didn't actually code that time.
But if you never made those crappy things to begin with, you would have never got to that point. We talk about that all the time.
Widget that somebody was like, "Oh yeah, I'll give you a little bit of money for," and they end up taking that and make Facebook out of it, and you're like, "I could have been part of Facebook," and you're like, "Yeah, but you went on and you built Google." I don't know, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's totally the way that people need to look at it. So there are deals that are terrible, and there are things that you shouldn't get into, but I know a lot of people who turn crappy deal situations into careers.
And that's not a bad thing, because it'll evolve, it'll open doors.
You got to say to yourself, and that's what I was talking about doing free. Okay? Sometimes you want to get paid for a remix, but you're not going to get paid for it. What you're going to get is an opportunity to show how good you are to that person's audience. Do you say no because you didn't get paid? Do you say no because you don't have any points on the record? At some point, you have to say no, because otherwise you're not going to be able to get income and make money from a project. But until you're in the position to be able to start making those decisions, you really need to say yes to almost anything that doesn't take you out of your core business.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant advice, because I think a lot of artists it's the whole thing of like, when do I get a manager? When do I do this? When do I do that? If you don't need one, if the business isn't there yet, you don't need one. And if you don't have a lot of things to say no to, you better start saying yes to some things, regardless of if it's the best thing or not.
So the way that I look at my business now, I can say no a lot now.
Yeah, now.
But what I do with how I sort of call it like putting chips on a table. You're at the wheel, the whatever stuff, the roulette, right? And the safe way is playing black or red. It's 50-50. Black or red, black or red, black or red, right? You hit black or red enough times, you have a big stack of chips. So you take the big stack of chips off the table, and then you keep playing black or red, and then every once in a while you're like, I'm going to just play 25 and see what happens. So that's the way that I look at what I do in the music business and taking chances with new projects. If I'm going to take a chance with something new, I don't put the weight of having that to make money. I will say, like, okay, I'm going to put the time into learning this new aspect of doing whatever, and I'm not going to drill people into, paying me for this thing that, even though I have 25 years worth of experience in the music business and I get paid good money for the other parts that I do, this is something that I'll speculate on, and I'll run with the person who's trying to do that business, and we can run together. Because if this thing that I'm incubating with you works, then I have a whole other industry that I can pull you into. Right?
Right.
So that's kind of the way that I look at everything now.
So it's worth it in a respect that isn't monetary. It's worth it, maybe not financially, but it is worth it in some other aspects.
I teach for that reason. I teach so that, like, I have private lessons that I teach people for production, for music business, for coaching, for all of that stuff. I teach so that I stay sharp, so that I learn new technology, so that I'm ahead of my students, so that I can find raw talent, so that I can guide someone that give them the guidance that I didn't have, so that I can get the excitement that person has from the successes that they get from me helping them down the path. And then we become friends, and it keeps me young, right? Yep. And then I can help them down their path. I can look them in the eye and be like, I have students that I know will never go anywhere, and at some point I have to jettison them. But the ones that I see the promise in, I'm happy to continue helping them, even, let's say, if they can't pay me anymore, or they can't, because that's not really why I'm doing it.
Yeah,
I'm doing it because I want to see them evolve, and I want to learn something from that evolution, and see myself in somebody else, see the excitement of their success. No one did that for me when I was coming up, and I wished I had somebody a number of times. If I look back at parts of my career when I was stumbling through business meetings and deals and relationships, and everybody, there's a bit of arrogance to do well in the music business. And I look back at some of the meetings I took, they're embarrassing. I mean, they got me down the road, but my first music business meeting was with a guy called Jason Jordan. He was at Sony Records, and he had Josh Wink's Ovum label. underneath he had signed Josh Wink's Ovum, I think, to Sony or something like that. He was my first music business meeting. And I was so aggressive in that meeting about like all the things that I wanted to do. I was probably like, I want to do this, I'm gonna do this, right? He thought I was fucking insane. But
and you thought you were just advocating for yourself very well, but
you're just like whatever. But he was insane too. But he still is insane, and he's a good friend of mine still. We evolved, both of us, through the music industry. He was my oldest music industry contact. We still do business. We found a way, like he was like, that guy's nuts, and that guy. And we realized we were both nuts in our own weird way. And I just was pushing so hard to get into the business that I didn't realize that I was like selling 8 things at once as opposed to like focusing in on what I could, something that can, I learned that as I got older. Don't sell the kitchen sink, just sell the, what's the widget that you're selling? But, make it easy for people to digest it. Don't come with like the whole house. Hip hop guys do that to me all the time. Yo, I want to work on my record, but I got my own label and I'm gonna put my own masters out. And I got my T-shirts and I got my sneakers and I got blah 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 blah. And I'm like, dude, you want to make a record or do you want to sell me sneakers? Like, slow roll, homie. We don't even have, like, we're not.
Especially in the early times, yeah.
It's hard because the enthusiasm has to temper the business, right?
Right. So we're like an hour into this like amazing interview. We have gone deep, wide, all directions. 2 things because I think you can speak to them very well, and I think that the audience, the producers in the audience, learners, students can definitely take some value from, is let's just demystify, break down licensing and publishing. A lot of times the two get tossed around. They're used interchangeably sometimes.
Yeah.
And it's like those are very main revenue sources, especially now in a time where we can't tour. None of us can tour. We're all stuck at home. All we can do is make music and get it out there and get it to people. Licensing and publishing.
Okay.
What are they? Let's break it down for the people.
All right. So before we can break down licensing and publishing, what we need to break down is what is the master recording and what is publishing or your writer's share of the master's recording. When you sit down and write a song or you produce a song, you make an electronic music song, you write a song, whatever. The intellectual property of that song is the publishing and writer's share. It may never be recorded. It could just be on sheet music. It can be, you can have a demo of it. It may never be, a production may not exist, right? But that intellectual property has a value. And there's 2 parts to the intellectual property. When you write a song, the writer's share is a total of 100%. The same intellectual property has a publishing share that is also 100%. So the intellectual property adds up to 200% on a song. It's a little confusing.
Yeah.
So if you and I write a song together, you own 50% of the song, I own 50% of the song. 50% of the publishing is yours, 50% of the publishing is mine. So, okay, so that's pretty easy to understand that?
Yeah.
The writer's part never changes. You always retain your writer's share. I always retain my writer's share. That totals 100% on the writer's side. But publishing-wise, that's sort of like something that you can use as a commodity to sell or to license or to get advances on your intellectual property. And what that means is if you and I write a song, it's 50-50. We register it with BMI. If we don't have publishing companies, they register the writer's share instead of 50% as 100%, 100%. Okay. The intellectual property always adds up to 200%. If I have a publishing company, 50% goes to the publishing, 50% goes to your publishing. If I do a deal on my publishing, I can sell a percentage of the publishing to somebody else for an advance on the record.
And who would you sell them to?
Okay, so let's say, Sony, BMG, Cobalt Music.
So
whoever,
a record label.
A publisher. Not the label yet. A label can actually, the label can also give you a publishing deal, but a label generally deals with the master recording.
Got it.
So we'll talk about that. So if you have music that you have created a master for, which means that you have recorded a version of the music and there's a master recording. That master recording, the ownership of that is 100%. There's no 200% there. But what that is a physical representation of your intellectual property. There can be many different masters based on a song. You can have a cover of the song. You can have the original recording. You can have a re-recording. You can have a remix. But the one master that you create, that's the master that you do a deal with a record label for. They will give you a deal. They'll either give you an advance or they will take a percentage of the master. You keep a percentage for them to exploit the master to make money. Now, that means that you can make money on the master side and you can make money on the publishing side. And they're not mutually exclusive. Sometimes they work in tandem, but they don't always have to. Here's an easy way. Okay, so Sony Records might want to put out my new hip-hop single. Sony Publishing might want to sign the publishing for that single. They're not the same.
Right.
Sony Records might say, we'll give you a $50,000 advance on this single to help help you to buy the master from you or license the master from you. The publishing company might say, because you got that deal on that single and you have these other 5 songs which we think have value, we're going to give you $250,000 for your publishing deal for 50% of your publishing, because we think that you're going to do well with this other material that's not signed yet.
So they're betting on the fact that it will get signed in the future.
Right. So the master is a little bit more proletariat. It's like the physical. You record the master recording. You have this master. You furnish the master to a label or to whomever is going to use it, a video game, a film. And then that master, they have to license the master. The publishing side, that also has to be licensed by whoever puts out the master, but there's a different deal that has to be done, and they're not the same. So I hope that's clear for people, and that's why master and publishing can be very lucrative in many different ways. A master will make money by the physical sale of that master. Right, so maybe you sell 1 million copies of a CD or 1 million streams of a song. That has a value. But the publishing also has a value because it's about the performance of that song. So if the song is performed on the radio has to pay royalties to the publishing side for performing that music. You also make money for having that song played in a stadium. You perform your song in a stadium, there's actually publishing money that the stadium has to pay you for performing your song in their stadium, because they're making revenue in that stadium while your music plays.
And here's my thing about that. Who is sitting in the stadium saying, what is this system that they have that says, yep, we played Ming's track at 4 p.m. during the Red Sox game?
The way that it works, this is actually a very interesting story, but there's a company called Muzuka, who nobody knows about. They're new. And in all fairness, I worked with them in the early days. I have shares in the company. They're a brilliant, brilliant company. And pretty soon they will be synonymous with live music royalty payments, because they're running the back ends where they basically are able to track down what music is being played in live venues and report it to BMI, ASCAP, and CSAC and SOCAN internationally. They're the ones driving that data. It's a data company. Really, really, really smart guys. What happens now is they look at the top 300 touring acts and they look at their set lists. Your manager, your tour manager sends it to BMI or sends it to ASCAP. You're supposed to send in your set list when you play. People don't know that. So the top touring acts are playing such large venues that for them it's very lucrative to send in their tour list. So if let's say you're Coldplay again, you're playing 50 stadiums across, America, 50 stadiums across whatever Europe. There's a big payout for every show when you play all of your songs. So their tour manager is sending that into ASCAP every, touring. But what they do is they take the top 300 touring acts and they split the revenue. They don't even they split the revenue between them. They don't pay out all of the tons of guys on the lower level.
Right.
And what Muzuka has done is figured out a way to get everybody paid for all of the music that's being performed, period.
Wow.
So how I got involved is I brought them the concept that, DJs also play very large venues and venues across the country. And not only do they play their own music, but they play their label's music, they play other people's music. And they're making a lot of money for these venues. And the set lists are in the histories of every time you play. And all a DJ needs to do is take their history and send it into BMI or ASCAP, and they can get paid for their performances. So if you're on the road and you're playing all your own music, that's another big revenue stream for you, which nobody knew existed. When I was in Ming and FS, we should have done that. We didn't know that was a thing to do.
Yep. And are the artists also getting paid? If you have that whole set list, and everybody's getting paid off of that.
Everybody gets paid their share. The cool thing about Muzuka, which everyone should look into, if you're interested in any of that live performance, go to muzuka.com. You can they have a Facebook Messenger app where you just drag a set list in the Messenger app and it populates, and you can just submit it to BMI or ASCAP, whatever. It's genius. I can't even tell you how genius it is. The amount of revenue and touring revenue is like $1.5 billion in the U.S. alone that's collected. Wow. So it's an immense amount of money, and that's why when you see how artists become successful, the disparity between the artist over here, the artist on the way up, and how the curve gets, it's exponential. It's because the revenue streams and a way to monetize become so infinitely large. Because you're playing huge venues, you can sell tons of merchandise. Your music's on the radio. It's like, it's the in-between, the proletariat DJ, or not DJ, but musician in that other slice. It really has to squeeze the blood out of the stone.
Could you spell that for us? Because some of the people in the chat are trying to look it up, and they're asking how to spell it.
Yeah, it's Muzooka, but let me just make sure that that's right.
Yeah, they got it.
Just Muzoo. Yeah, it's Muzooka. And
perfect.
They are basically a white label company that all of these major publishers they're running the back ends for them now, and it's massive. But that's a whole other. If you're an artist,
world, yeah.
You should register yourself with Muzuka. They have an asset repository that allows you to serve up. The other thing that they do is that they have an asset repository that allows artists to control the images and stuff that they use for all their live performances. So they're feeding the data to iHeartRadio. Let's say Beck comes out on a new tour and Beck wants everything to look X, Y, and Z. They just go to Muzuka, they upload all their stuff. And now Ticketmaster has all the new photos and everything from Beck, and it's the right press photo, it's the right this, and it's all. So they're doing all the data behind all of that. It's kind of brilliant. We could talk about Muzuka like for hours. It's so unbelievable.
That's a whole other stream. Yeah.
It's a whole other thing. It's a whole, other whatever. But what you need to understand about there's a master in the publishing. When you license a piece of music, whether it's to film and television, to a label, to whomever, there's two sides to it. So say McDonald's wants to use your new indie dance single as their in their commercial. They have to pay you for the master, and they have to pay you for the publishing. If you own the master and the publishing, you get both. If you have a record deal, the label gets whatever percentage of the master that they own, and you get the other percentage. And if you own all the publishing, you get the publishing. If you have a publishing deal, you get your split. That's where that's why publishers want part of your catalog, because they know on lucrative licensing deals, they can make their full advance back very quickly through one or two big licenses. And if your music fits what's happening currently in the licensing landscape, like the Black Keys are a perfect example. That music was not made for license. They didn't make it to license it. That's what those dudes made.
No, just everybody licensed it.
Right. But so the Black Keys were like Ming and FS in their own right, in their own sense. They just made this music that sonically worked.
Perfect for the perfect time, for the perfect projects. Yeah.
Exactly. And so all of a sudden, here are these guys making this sort of music that they love, but it's like the music that everybody wants to license. So the value of their songs went from probably the first one was like a $10,000 license to the Black Keys license things for $250,000, if not more than that. I mean, you can get $1 million license off of a song for if someone believes that it's going to bring value to your cell phone ad. And you can't, and then there's companies who just make music based off of those trends. Oh, everybody wants a Black Keys track, so I'm going to make 15 tracks that sounds like the Black Keys.
Yeah.
So when the Black Keys say no, you can license my track for 10,000 instead of 150,000 or a million. That's the game. That's the where you see the value.
So where does this fit in for young producers, like people that are putting lots of music out, whether it's like just distributing it themselves, Spotify, SoundCloud, all that, and they have some good music that's probably worth getting it out to people and places. Like, what advice do you have for those people? Do they need to link up with a publisher? Should they be doing their own publishing? Should they be submitting to some of these sites that basically like call for like, hey, we need a hardcore dubstep track for a
Yes, and
horror movie
so
project?
look, again, in the beginning, you're going to have to do some bad deals. There's
Mhm.
plenty of sites that want to take 50% of your title or 80% of the income to list it in their their ecosystem so that people can go license it or whatever. Um, but if you're not making money from the music business and you want to make money, that's how you learn.
Yeah.
And if the other thing about being a music producer, and this is the same about being a painter or any sort of a writer, anyone who makes, I call it being light blue collar. It seems like a white collar job, but it's really very blue collar. It's very physical.
Yeah.
Anybody who creates something, you have to create a lot of it. It's very rare that you make 10 widgets and the 10 widgets pay for your whole entire life, right?
Right.
You're going to make millions of widgets. You're going to make widgets forever. And if you're driven to make music and widgets, or whatever it may be, art, film, you'll make so much of it that you shouldn't be worried about the infant stage of your creations. And for a lot of young producers, I feel like they're very concerned about the early creations being perfect and the early creations being in good deals and the early creations having this value that the industry is telling them. There's a lot of people like on Instagram and places telling you that, you should own your master, that you should own your this and you should do that. What I really think you need to do is focus on what you're good at and what you're not good at. I'm really good at making music. I'm really bad at mixing my stuff. Okay, so find an engineer that you can work with, that you can afford, or is your friend you can do their accounting. I don't know. Like, there's a lot of trading that happens in the music business. Trade your services for somebody else's service. Give someone a nice logo so they'll mix your records. Like there's a lot of that free. What I was saying, that you need to do in order to make yourself available.
Right.
So, hey, look, you do a bunch of beats. If the other thing is test the market.
And how does one do that? Do you mean like put it out on social media, see how people react, send it out to some people, see if you get any response?
Yeah, I mean, like, I think the one thing that I didn't have when social media is brilliant and it's also terrible. Here's a couple of things. Your friends are generally not good people to send your music to get real feedback. They're
Right.
your friends. Most people aren't like New Yorkers like myself who'll just like look you in the face and be like, "I love you, but your music
It's
sucks."
terrible.
Like,
Yeah.
right. That's not normal, right? So what I think you need is I've always tried to find a very tight-knit circle of people that will be honest with me with my creative process and give me feedback that's constructive and helps me move forward. This may come in the form now of you being able to get a mentor, someone like me, someone like you, someone like Max at 343. So to be able to look at somebody who can, give you constructive criticism, build you up, but also be real with you, right? That's important. So build your creative circle with people who you can trust, who want you to grow, and are going to benefit from your success because they're not competing with you in a negative way. Okay. So that's really important. It's very hard to build that circle because when you're young, people get jealous about things and they see you being successful. So they tell you you're not good when you're really good, or
Yeah.
you're not good, but they tell you that you're good because they're better than you. And they just kind of like, make them look better. You got to find other people in different disciplines who can look at you and be like, I hate all these songs, but I love these too. There's something about these too. Or these lyrics are brilliant. This is actually the verse, or the chorus is, this verse should be a chorus. And, or
Yeah.
I love your music, but why is your snare so goddamn loud? I don't know.
Yep.
So you need to build that circle. You need to test the market with that circle and by trying to send your music out to labels that you like. There's a reason why the label system is there. It's not just to steal your money. It's labels have a sound and people who are passionate about the music that they're putting out. If you send music to a label that understands that you're passionate and your sound matches the label, they'll probably get back to you and say, you know, this one's not quite right, but maybe we'll put this on our junior label. Or if you fix X, Y, and Z, this one could be really good. Or love the content, the mixing is not up there yet. We can send you to somebody who can mix it. Mixing is great. Track is boring as anything, right? So there's all these things. You will have to allow the market to give you feedback. If you send your stuff out to 15 labels and everybody says no, well, could be a lot of reasons why. A, the music might not be good. B, you might be sending it to labels that don't do the style of music that you're doing. You don't know your audience. C, you have absolutely no social media or social presence, so they can't. You know, everybody looks at those things at the same time to see where you're at.
Right.
I mean, or you're so unique, which is usually not the case, that you should be putting out your own music.
Yeah.
You know, there's how many Chance the Rappers are there, right? It's like that's again, you see one person do this, create this whole thing, and then everyone's like, I'm Chance the Rapper.
Yes. And then this one situation gets like, oh, well, this is how it should be for everybody. And it's like, well,
Daft
if it could, it would.
They're masters, but the chances of you owning your masters and getting a deal like Daft Punk is about zero. It was the right place at the right time with the right bit of information, and all the things aligned, and boom, Daft Punk is like the anomaly, and the industry loved it, but it's a business anomaly.
You can spend your career fighting the industry, but you're not going to have that much of a career if you're spending all your time fighting that system.
Yeah. So let me give you a little quick advice about how to test the market. When someone comes to me about producing songs for them or a record for them or their album or whatever, the first thing that I'll ask them is, I want you to build me a Spotify playlist of music that you think your music should be played with. So if I was to go to Spotify and it was the Sunny Day playlist, how would your music fit into this playlist? What bands are on this playlist? So I can sonically hear what you think your music is supposed to sound like. The second playlist I'll ask you to make is play me a playlist of sonic things that you are turned on by, that so we can talk about music in a non-technical way so that we can build a rapport about how we speak about what music is. So you can be like, I love the bass line in this song. I love the way the drums sound in this song. I love the way the vocals sound in this song. And it doesn't have to be music that you necessarily love, but it's music that there's something sonically interesting in there for you. And in those two things, I get a lot of information comes my way. The first part is, do you understand what you sound like as a musician? Did you pick music that sounds like your music? Do you know who your contemporaries are? That's our sonic goal, is to get your music there. If you send me music and in your playlist it's like the Foo Fighters and I don't know, whatever, blah blah blah, bunch of rock bands, and then you sound like Britney Spears, I'm going to be like, you have no idea either what you sound like, or you have no idea how the business works. So both of those things are bad for me.
Yep.
Because I'm going to be like, listen, you need to. If we're going to be successful producing your music, I need to know what bucket it's supposed to end up in. And a playlist gives you a good bucket of songs, right? So like nowadays, people mix all kinds of genres in a playlist, but there's a feeling to it, right? I'm electronic chill, but I could be in the acoustic playlist because there's acoustic instruments in there, and I've got an ethereal, right? So all these things. Yeah. That's part of it. And so that's one way of testing your music, right? Is build a playlist. If you were giving it to someone like me, we'd be working together. But you can also build a playlist, stick your music in there, and play it at a party where nobody knows it's your music. And if during the party your music comes on and you rush over to the sound system to turn it up because it's not loud enough, or it's the wrong tempo, or it's there's all these things like what I mean?
Drawing the wrong kind of attention from the party
the
suddenly.
Wrong kind of attention. Yeah. Well, there you go. That's testing the market. You're not where you think you are, and that music's not either in the right playlist, or you're playing it the wrong time. those are good things to figure out,
For sure.
right?
Yeah, and we are coming up towards the end, but we did have a question from
Oh,
chat.
good. From who?
As from Regine Siller on YouTube asks, as a singer-songwriter, could you explain the point system / payment when you're collaborating with producers and musicians to create a song?
Okay, I'm not 100% sure what you're asking. The point system is the percentages of the master and the publishing. If you write a song 100% by yourself, no one helps you write the song. You own that song 100%. If you want to hire a producer to produce that song, producers will often ask for points on the record, meaning a percentage of the master because of what they're going to do. You just write the song with a guitar, and your voice, but they're going to do a full production. So in their version or vision of your song, they would like, let's say, 5 points on your production, which means 5% of the master. When you co-write songs with people, the general friendly rule, unless you talk about this ahead of time, is that however many bodies are in the room writing the song, you split it up equally. So if you and I write the song, it's 50-50. If you, I, and another person are in the room writing the song, it's 33-33-33, and so on and so forth. Sometimes people who have bands and they're the singer or like a guitar player and the singer are like the main people who write the songs. Sometimes so everybody has skin in the game, they will share the writing with everyone in the band, even though they're not writing the songs. The drummer may play their parts and the bass player may play their parts, but they're not technically the songwriters if just you and the singer write the song. You and the guitar player write the songs. So there are many bands in history where you'd be surprised. You'd think that everybody's got an equal share, but it's really the person who's writing the song and the person, that.
And the whole goal of this is so that, okay, everybody who's in the room writing the song, you get the split. That means when that song gets licensed to a Super Bowl
Everybody gets their
commercial,
piece.
everybody's getting paid. When that song sells however many records or streamed this many times, everybody gets their piece.
Now, a lot of, I think, singer-songwriters often are like, well, why would I write a song with somebody else? And the reason is that, two heads are better than one. And often, sometimes writers can really help you bring the best out of yourself. They can help you refocus your lyrics or your melodies and bring out a better part in your voice, or help you write more interesting, just better stuff in general. And then you have two people who will want to market that song. Don't forget about that. Good songwriters and good producers don't just stop at doing the work that they're getting paid to do, or that they're if I work with you, I'm vested in your success. So I'm going to market you on my social media. I'm going to send you to the people that I want you to hear. I send you, I'll send that stuff out as my part of my social outreach,
Right.
because I'm proud of what I did and I want you to do well. But that's why sometimes it's worth, like, when you get a big record deal, if you get one, is to hire a big producer, because they have a very big network, and that comes with a lot. There's a lot of that position stuff that happens as you move up
And
the
that's a
chain.
little bit of that like free you kind of talk about, right? Like, because
Right.
you hire the big producer, they're getting paid to produce your record, but that also means they're going to show it to their friends. And if they're a big producer, that means they've got big friends, like that's a little bit of
Yeah, I
the,
mean, like, you're in the studio with this big producer, and all of a sudden that big producer is like, you know what, Chance the Rapper wants to come by and say what's up. I was telling him about you, and then Chance the Rapper comes in, and you and Chance the Rapper just did a cut on your record that would have never happened
yeah,
if you did it with Bobby Joe, who was good but doesn't know, is nowhere.
right.
Um, that's best case scenario, but still,
But little micro things happen. I find that like even in like where I am in my career, like the little things that happen from the things you say yes to that maybe weren't the best things to say yes to, but something grew out of it. Like that's how you build and that's how you grow. That's
I
how
mean,
it's been
I
for
have a
me.
lot of clients, so if I'm happy with a client, I'm always thinking, can I put them with this other person? The person that I was writing with this week, I was like, hey, I'd really love it if you'd write a hook for this other artist I'm working on. I think we're writing great songs. This artist could use some of your hook writing ability. They write great verses, but they need some of your hook. Can we do that? Can we make that happen? And then if they get along, who knows? Maybe that artist becomes a guest artist on that record, or vice versa. And you build a community of like-minded creators. Um, and that's really what this is all about, anyways. Finding your family.
Yeah, and as we come to the end of this stream, I think that is probably the biggest takeaway from our conversation because it's strung through the whole thing from the beginning all the way up until now till coming to the end of this conversation is like building that family, building that team around you, supplementing the skills that you lack with people who have those skills but lack the skills that you have, and building each other up, running in parallel. I think that that has come across so well in this interview, and it seems like it's afforded you a lot of success throughout the music industry, which can be very hard to navigate, especially if you're trying to navigate it alone. I guess the message is don't do it alone.
Yeah, I mean, I got into music. For me, was always super social. It was my escape as a young person. I could be with, friends in a band and just enjoy myself. And
Right.
those musical relationships were always the most important in my life. So a good when you're surrounded with people that you really enjoy, your life is really fulfilling. You don't worry about the money as much because hopefully people get to the end of this part here. It's like, yeah, we talked a lot about the business because the music business is a business, and if you want to make money at it, there's things that you need to do. But I do this because I love music. That was always paramount for me. But that doesn't make it a career for you. It could just be a great hobby. But it brings me to wonderful people. I mean, I'm still meeting amazing people that make my life better. And I have kids and a wife now, and it's like that part of it. I have other responsibilities, but life is still better when I meet great musicians. Always better. I always say music was my first wife. Like and we never got divorced.
That's
Music has
funny.
always been there for me, always been there, and music will always be there for me, no matter even if I stop doing it professionally tomorrow. I mean, you have to have it in you to understand that music is not just a solitary animal; it's communal. And the more you can bring that community aspect into your team and into your flow, the better you're going to do.
Amazing. People are really vibing with this whole message, and chat is saying really nice things. Finding your music soul tribe, creative circle. And Nico is like, where's Nico? Nico, yo, Ming is a G in the chat. Nice.
What's up, Nico?
Um, Juan,
Thanks
great
for
words. Yeah,
Piano from Producers, dude. That guy's on another level. People should check him out too. He's got, I think he's doing all this crazy MIDI pack stuff now. Check out Piano for Producers if you're looking to learn some piano stuff. That guy's a madman. He's being
for
nice to me.
sure. You guys have been great in the chat. Thank you all for hanging. I hope you've taken some value today. We are at the end of this interview today, but if you are just joining in, I know some people popped in like towards the end. This whole interview is going to be up when we're done. It's going to be up on my channel, on 343 Labs channel. Of course, today's stream was brought to you by 343 Labs, which is an electronic music school in New York City, and online, soon to be in Berlin. So if you want to take courses with some amazing producers and musicians that have been in this industry for a long time, they're charting on Beatport, Ableton certified trainers, all that, 343labs.com. Link is in the description. Check out some courses. We're all trapped inside. Our summer course is about to ramp up. So we have like immersive summer courses. So if you want to take advantage of the summer and the fact that we can't go out to the beach in a lot of places, and you want to hole up in your studio and make some progress, 343labs.com is the way to go. Ming, thank you so much for having this conversation. I feel like we already feel like we need to have a part 2 and probably a part 3. Like
I'm
there's so
down,
much
man. I'm
deeper
always
that we could
down. I'm
go.
always down to parts.
Anything to plug on your end? Anywhere people can find you? What you want to send
I
them
have a
to?
couple new things I've launched just so everybody knows. You can follow me at Mings Music. All my stuff is at Mings Music, except I think SoundCloud is Ming, but I don't really do much on SoundCloud anymore. I have a weekly radio show called Ming Presents Warmth. You can search for that on iTunes. It's syndicated on 30 different stations, and then it goes to the podcast format on iTunes and on Mixcloud. And I started a new interview podcast called The Re-Up. It's every Friday, usually at 3 p.m. I'm interviewing interesting musicians, artists, promoters, whatever. And we basically just get on Instagram Live at Mings Music at 3 p.m. EST, and we just chew the rag for an hour. And you'll meet some really interesting people. I've had Tommy Sunshine. I had Sid. I've got Will Clark tomorrow. I have Billy Kenny. I have Raymond Roker from Herb Magazine. I have Disco Donnie, who's one of the biggest promoters in America. So if you like this conversation, it's a little pretty informal. I do it live, and then I put it up on a podcast version, which you can get on Spotify, Instagram. I'm sorry, iTunes. That's Ming Presents the Re-Up. And I have tons of new house music coming out. I just put out a track called White Horse. It's a remake of the classic White Horse. And follow me on Spotify. Search for Ming. Search for Ming White Horse. It's easier to find me that way.
Awesome. All right, chat community, I hope you are all able to check that out and show Ming some support. And I'm sure if you dive into that podcast he's got going on, you will grab even more value.
And you can hit me on social media too. I'm not. One thing I always say at the end of these kind of things that I do is that everybody is like a click away these days. Right. You can hit me on Instagram. I will respond to you. Just don't, like, be weird.
Don't spam. Don't send.
Yeah, I mean, whatever. I'm like, go check out my beats. Like,
yeah.
I'm not here for,
just keep it
like,
cool.
Whatever. Just keep it cool. But everyone's available. So, keep it cool. Reach out to me. Stay in touch. Stay in touch with 343 Labs. Thank you so much for having me on your show. This was fun.
Yeah, for sure. This was a lot of fun. Ming, thank you so much. Like I said, chat, this will be available after. Make sure you check it out both on the 343 Labs channel and on my channel. So for now, this has been TAETRO and Ming. Have a good one.